All right, folks, welcome to the Strong for Life podcast. Today, I've got Andrew Reid from Melbourne on, and Andrew specifically works with guys over 40. He is potentially the most experienced coach in Australia now, and that's not a joke. Andrew's been in the industry for a long, long time. He's got a huge amount of knowledge. We met back in 2016 at a Stephen Maxwell workshop, and today we're going to do a masterclass on all the things guys over 40 need to know about health and fitness. So, Andrew, welcome to the show and thanks for jumping on today.
Yeah, what a great intro. Thank you.
You're welcome, mate. So, I know you want to really jump in and give actionable advice for guys, but can you give a quick overview of who you are for people who don't know who you are or know about your background in the industry?
What do you mean they don't know who I am? I'm confused. All right. So got into personal training actually in high school. So not as a certified personal trainer. That process was just coming in. But the first person I ever trained, I was in the final year of high school. I was a kid in my year who was a really good high jumper, and he'd come second at the all schools conference for athletics the year before, and he wanted to win that year. And I was already spending a lot of time in the gym. I was carrying, like bodybuilding magazines around and that kind of thing. And he asked me if I'd help him. Terrible. I remember the first workout we did together. I decided we needed a lot of calf work. So we went from like no calf work to, I don't know, a couple of hundred reps of calf work probably in the first workout. And neither of us could walk properly for about 3 days afterwards. Like I remember couldn't even straighten my legs out. My calves were so sore. So dabbled in it early. I think I got certified in when I was 21, which is, that's 1992. And so been at it since. I have done other things, like I've owned a cafe and things along the way, which, by the way, if you ever want to chuck your life away in terms of spare time, own a hospitality business and train people at the same time. So I would get up at like 4, go and train people for a couple of hours, get to my cafe by like about 6:30 or so, work all day till about 4. And because we're in the city, we didn't do evenings. It was just breakfast and lunch, and then drive and train some more people, train myself, go home and get up again at 4 the next morning. So even though I've had other stuff along the way, the training thing's been there consistently the whole time. I've trained, I've weirdly trained a 75-year-old world champion powerlifter. It's my mother who set multiple world records. I've trained a couple of jiu-jitsu world champions, Tour de France cyclists, pro Ironman triathletes, judo Olympians, taekwondo Olympians, rowers. But mostly what I've done is train regular people. So I was very lucky early on. I met Ian King, who's like a godfather of strength and conditioning in Australia, and learned like what was a smart way to train people for performance early on. Never got into, because in Australia, there's not many opportunities for performance. We've got a small number of AFL teams. We've got a very small number of soccer and rugby teams. There's a few cricket teams, but in terms of jobs in strength and conditioning, there's very few. And I realized I was interning at the Institute of Sport, and I was making more money as doing about 30 hours of personal training a week than the guy who was running the Institute of Sport strength and conditioning program. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, this is not a direction I want to go in. But probably what I'm best at is taking the stuff that you see good athletes use, figuring out how to give it to someone who's 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever in a way that they can actually still make use of, and simplifying it for them so they get great performance. And, I've got probably, in terms of like craziest things I've trained before. So my mother breaking 4 world records and winning 2 world championships in powerlifting in her 70s, which is pretty weird. I trained a guy in his early 60s for a 100-mile ultra marathon, which is an incredible distance for anyone to run, let alone a guy in his 60s. He's actually, this weekend, he's doing a 200-mile ultra run. I'm not coaching him, so I can't claim that one, unfortunately. But and plenty of people for marathons and Ironmans and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. So while my heart is always with performance, the background's really in just training regular people to go and do some really fun, adventurous stuff. And that's like on Facebook, my page is called The Athletic Adventurer. So it's Andrew Reid at, like /facebook.com/athletic adventure or something, I think it is, because what I want people to do is use athleticism as a springboard for leading a more fulfilling life.
Yeah, mate, that's I guess one thing I'd like to go into from that point is one thing I'm seeing a lot of, and you probably do as well, is the mindset limitations. Like, oh well, I'm 40 now. Like, it's okay for these guys in their 20s, and especially with your mom, like, breaking world records in her 70s. Can you maybe touch on that, like the impact of people's limiting beliefs in what they can do after 40, because that seems to be a big thing that
Yeah.
stops people from even trying.
Well, and mum is such a great example of that. So I started training her when she was 50, right? So she was the same age I am now, roughly, when I first started. And she was doing workouts before then, but kind of like, if you know what 5BX is this like Canadian calisthenics program that they developed for the Air Force. So it's like a military-based calisthenics program. She was doing that. She was playing squash. But I was like, well, this is all a bit of a mess. Like, let's make this more organized for you. And she was they live in a house that's 3 stories, and she would do like sprints up and down the stairs and burpees and like crazy stuff still in her 50s. And obviously that got more and more modified the older she got. For her 70th birthday, we had been deadlifting primarily to help her golf game, because she recognized that being stronger, she would hit the ball further. And so she got a little bit serious about strength training at about 65, I would say. And for her 70th, I suggested it was good that she deadlift 70 kilo, and she only weighs 50. So, like, she's tiny, and she did. And then the next year I said, well, it's got to be 75, because actually the smallest plates I had at the time were 2.5 kilo plates. So we could only go up by 5 kilo anyway. And she did that. And we were standing around at the end of that, and I said, like, I wonder what the world record is for like a 50 kilo, 70-year-old woman to be able to lift in competition. And it turned out it was 77.5 kilo. And so I said to her, hey, you're only 2.5 kilo off a world record here. And next thing I knew, she'd gone home and joined the Powerlifting Federation in Australia and signed up for a competition. And 4 months later, set her first world record. So like her first lift was 80, as in like her first, like the final lift to set the world record was 80. We went to the World Championship. She had a double hamstring tear, because they were actually in Australia that year. She had a double hamstring tear on her opening lift. And that was down to my inexperience as a coach. We hadn't warmed up enough. And then about 2 years of rehab. So now she's like 74. So she's at the top of that age group. We went to, like, another Aussie comp, so you set a standard so you could go to Worlds. I think she broke a world record again. Then we went to Worlds, won a world championship, broke a world record. And then the next year went to Worlds again, and now in a new age group. So she's got records actually in 2 age groups, and set another record, and actually a heavier weight than she had. So her best now is 87.5 at 50 kilo. And she's got records in both the 74 and 79 age group. But, like, all her friends that she plays golf with and stuff, they're like, oh, I could never do that. She started off deadlifting a 16 kilo kettlebell, right? And I was of the same mind, like, oh, she's old, she's little, better be careful. And then the 16 would be flying off the floor. I'm like, well, let's try the 20. Then let's try a 32. And then let's try 220s. Let's, you know what I mean? And then we ran out of kettlebells. And I was like, because now the kettlebells are getting high enough and heavy enough that, well, let's start with the bar. And so then we started with, 40, 50 kilo on the bar. And then it was more and more and more. And what it showed me was that the biggest difference is recovery. That's the biggest thing. She has so few sets up her sleeve. Like, if you go to a powerlifting comp and you watch younger people, like 40, 50-year-olds warm up, they will get so many sets of warm-ups in, and they might be working up to a heavier weight, so they need more warm-up sets anyway. My mum gets about 10. That's it. She's got about 10 decent reps in her for warm-ups. And so we've got to be really careful about how we use them. Got to be really careful about what you pick as your opening lift. because and even you get a fourth lift if you're going to set a world record in a powerlifting competition. So you get your normal 3, but if you're going for a world record, they'll give you a fourth lift. She's never been able to do a fourth lift, even though she probably could have lifted heavier in the comp. She just had nothing left, like would run out of reps, basically. And even then, between the small number of warm-up reps and the 3 lifts of competition, so she's done like 13 to 15 reps total for the day, sore for 2 or 3 days afterwards. So, you know, like, think when you were 40, you could max out. Well, you're not even 40 yet. When you're 30, you can max out and you can go back tomorrow. And that's what people see. And you even see guys like Randy Couture, you know, like UFC champion, amazing, like just a specimen of a guy physically. And he started saying when he was about 40, he noticed the difference in recovery, but he could still go with the guys. They could go back the next day. He would need a day off. And now at 50, I can still go, but maybe it's 2 or 3 days off. And, you know, like, so the older you get, that's the big thing, is the recovery. So much of the rest of it is in your head, though. I mean, we were in Nepal recently. I was definitely the oldest person walking around where we were, and I was chewing people up and spitting them out. But so you can still go, but my knees have been sore for 6 weeks since we've been home.
Yeah.
So the difference is recovery.
Yeah, man. That's such an awesome story, mate. Like, it must have been fantastic for your relationship as well. Like, doing all that
Amazing
with your mom.
How many people get to and you know, my parents have got decent money in retirement. So like you go away with my mom and you fly business class. And so like, how many people as adults can say they've been on a business class trip overseas with their mum to set world records? And like the last one was in Orlando, Florida, where Disney World is. So we went to see the Blue Man Group. We went to Universal and rode some, and my mum's a speed freak. We rode some roller coasters together. I remember we were on this one, it's called Hulk, and it's fast. I mean, I race motorbikes and it's fast. And I remember thinking we were on this thing and we're screaming along. And I thought to myself, I should check if mum's okay. Maybe she's had a heart attack or something. And I look and she's next to me. And my mum wears mirrored Oakleys, you know, like the triathletes and cyclists might wear everywhere. And she's just in a mirrored Oakleys and she's got this massive smile on her face. Like, how many people get to do that as an adult with either of their parents? Like, it was amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to see like her life. Let's just say she stopped training at 50 versus, you know, that's one path she took. She just followed like the path of a normal Western person. And the quality of life she has now, you know, since then.
Well,
like, that would be very interesting.
I can tell you. I mean, it's not like a twin experiment, but my parents have done exactly that. So my dad is not into exercise at all. He's always done the bare minimum he felt he needed to stay healthy. He was a really successful businessman, but he shows all the, you know, like the adaptation from being over at desk all the time. So his posture's not great. He's had 2 knee replacements. He's a little bit overweight now. He's unsteady on his feet. They are the same age. In terms of health, though, I mean, my mother it's night and day. I can tell you exactly what the difference is every time I see my parents.
Yeah, that's super interesting, man.
Or even my brother and I, he's 3 years older than me. So I'm 52 now. He's 55. When he turned 50, he had his gallbladder taken out. So just destroyed it with a high-fat diet. Now, my dad has had his gallbladder taken out too, but it's 70. So my brother, through poor choices, has managed to wreck his body 20 years earlier than my dad. And here I am. I'm older than he was when he had his gallbladder taken out. And as far as my doctors are concerned, there's nothing wrong with me at all. So, you know, again, you can see exactly what happens at 50. Unfortunately, because my brother's overweight, doesn't look after himself, there's a very real chance that it's a sad race between him and my dad to see who hits the ground first.
Yeah, man. I think that's the issue that I'd like you to unpackage that, and then we can go into the questions, because there's that mindset issue. It's the environmental problem of just being in the world. It's set up not to move, not to eat well. but also the way you explained your training with your mom, it's like you meet her where she's at, and then you progressed it from there. Whereas a lot of people jump into like F45, they wreck their knees and their back, and then they're like, oh, I must be doing something wrong because like my body's breaking. Like, so maybe that can be the first step we can start, and then we can jump into like the more specific questions around, like, let's just
Yeah.
say guys 45, hasn't done anything since college or high school. He's tried like going to a few HIIT classes, wrecks his body, has tried a few diets, deprived himself, and then, you know, binges afterwards. So what would be the first step someone like that you'd recommend for
Right.
that initial month, we'll say?
So I used to say, and I trained my brother for a short period of time a long time ago. We did the Kokoda track, which you might know about because you were here. So it's in Papua New Guinea, quite a famous hike. My dad wanted to do it. You know, like old guys seem to get into military stuff. Anyway, so my dad wanted to do this. He conned my brother and I into doing it with me. My brother trained with me, but I had a guy who was, and this was 2009, so 14 years ago. My brother was about 40, right? So exactly the guy you're talking about. Hadn't done anything since he played sport in high school. Office job, you know, like the kind of guy who doesn't have calluses on his hands, you know. And I recognized that I couldn't make him sore because I wanted him to come back. I couldn't make him scared because I wanted him to come back. And I had to help him be successful with exercise. And I recently watched this thing with Jordan Peterson. He said, you got to make it so easy you can't fail. And that's exactly what it is, because every time you fail, like the way your brain works is no matter what you do, whether it's a good or bad thing, you're developing more skill at it. Right. So if I quit on myself because my diet is so extreme, I can't stick to it. Right. I quit. All I've done is make myself better at quitting diets in the future. Whereas if I go to the gym, and even if it's nothing, go to the gym, walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes, go home, right? Next day, go back to 6 minutes. Next day, go back to 7 minutes. And you don't think you're doing anything, but what you're doing is strengthening that bond. You're making yourself better at being successful going to the gym. Eventually, you get to the point where, like us today, so I got up at 5. I had a live video call with clients at 6, had another one at 7. We had an electrician come at 8. In between the second video call, the electrician had to walk the dog. He was here all day. So I'm, you know, kind of helping him out, do different things. He left at about 3:30, walked the dog again, came home, lift weights. Most people would have blown off the weights there, right? End of the day, it's Friday for us, but I'm so used to working out that, you know, like that bond is so strong, it's almost impossible not to do it now. Like something would have to be really wrong because my skill at lifting weights, not actually lifting the weights, but as in going and doing a workout, is so strong, it's part of me. It's like putting on a seatbelt, brushing your teeth, that kind of stuff. And that's where you need to get to. But the only way you get there is make it so easy you can't fail. You can't give yourself a reason not to do it today. And you don't need to start with anything hard. And that's the other thing that people start with is they think it has to be HIIT. They think it has to be, I don't know, like a full-blown keto diet with 24-hour fasts on the weekend. And that's way too difficult for you right now. How about just don't eat some junk food today? Let's just start with something that is really easy to be successful at, or even just drink another glass of water. Like start with something you can't fail at, and then we'll build on it. But for today, I just need to get you moving. It doesn't even matter what it is.
Yeah, man. It's really it's not funny, but it's like every coach I talk to who's got like 20 plus years experience, like this is the advice. You know, it's not like diet, you need to follow this specific diet.
Do you know how rare it is that I actually have a training conversation with someone? I have a lot of conversations about sleep, have a lot of conversations about, you know, like being a little bit nicer to yourself because you're under a lot of pressure. I mean, at one point during COVID, I was training a US Army brigadier who was in charge of the vaccine rollout for the US Army, right? He had 4 kids who were both, 2 were in high school, 2 were college, right? So, and US college, right? So these ones in high school about to incur like $100,000 a year debt for him as well, right? So like huge stress, both at home and at work. And he would have days where he's like, I'm not doing good enough. This is a failure. I'm really sorry. I'm letting you down. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, the fact that you didn't go and drink half a a bottle of whiskey like you used to, that's a huge win, you know, and you went for a walk and calmed down instead of blasting your kids because you'd had such a shit day at work. Like you need to be a little bit nicer to yourself. I have a lot of those conversations. I don't have many conversations where, hey, you're loafing on set 3 of bench press. You need to lift weight, like lift more weight or do 2 more reps. I have very few of those conversations. I have a lot of conversations about habit building, lifestyle, you know, and like you said, meeting someone where they are. It doesn't need to be this training plan, because the reality is most people are so stressed out from poor sleep, bad diet, general lifestyle stress, work stress, relationship stress, like all this other stuff. They're already up to here with stress. I can't add on a workout that has this much stress. I can only add on something that's got this much stress in it. And for today, that might mean a walk around the block.
Yeah, man, that's very similar. We focus on like planning and sleep, and technology hygiene as well as a massive one. Like,
Yeah.
you know, being constantly online and wired. Let's jump into the questions, man, because I think that's going to be super valuable. You've already like knocked it out of the park with everything so far.
All right, I'm done. I've got it.
Yeah, that's it, done. So okay, a lot of people now, like people like Peter Attia, have kind of got this on the, you know, more people are asking about this, like muscle mass as you age, the negative impact, the, you know, how important it is. So for guys over 40 in particular, like, why should they maintain muscle mass and strength as they age, and how can they actually go about doing that?
Yeah, so I disagree about the muscle mass part, because I think that's a little bit clumsy, that distinction. So the distinction shouldn't be about just outright size. If you look at what, and you know, we've always known that loss of muscle was a problem with aging, but now they're distinguishing between which muscle we're losing, and they're showing it's fast twitch fibers, right? And so that's why people are saying strength training. And like usual in the fitness industry, people confuse strength training and mass as being the same thing. Those are 2 different things. I can train for power, which in particular is the thing that we start to lack as we get older. If you've ever got a 50-year-old client and put a box in front of them and told them to jump on top of it, you'll see how much power they've lacked over the last few years. Like most of them will be rooted to the ground because their brain will know that this is dangerous for us because we don't even train power. So power is the thing we want to train, not necessarily size. And I think chasing that size thing, again, it's a clumsy way to think about it, because there is going to be some muscle loss as you age. That's unavoidable. The degree of it we can change a little bit, and I think you'll see studies in about 10 years time on my generation will show that actually there's who stay active show less age-related muscle loss than say from 20 years ago, because they've been encouraged to stay active. But because there's some loss of size, if you maintain the same weight as you get older, you're just getting fatter. That's the only possible thing that can be happening, right? Like if your weight is a flat line and we know your muscle mass is decreasing, even just slightly, but you maintain the same weight, you're just getting fatter. And we know, and BMI is not a perfect measurement, but there is like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of points of data on BMI and risk for excessive BMI. So we shouldn't be encouraging people to like stay massed up, you know. We should be encouraging them to stay lean and healthy, which is relatively easy to do, and then train to be as strong and powerful as possible. And the benefits, and I actually ran, this is one of the other things I did on the side. My family owned an aged care home. So for a period of time, I ran it for them for about 4 years. So we renovated it so it was up to the new guidelines at the time that the government had brought in. And we had 0 customers on day one, and then built it up till we had a good solid customer base. And then we sold the business after a few years. And the problems you see in people who stop moving are definitely mobility problems. So it's clearly a loss of independence, a loss of stability when they walk. And that's a really big one. So when you look at one of the big reasons to maintain strength and even some muscle mass, it's falls prevention. And if you do fall, it's padding for when you hit the ground. There's this really weird statistic where being overweight is harmful up until about 70, 75 years old. And then it is actually healthy because when you fall over, you've got some padding. So the really little elderly people like my mum are actually at higher risk when they get older than the slightly fatter ones who've survived to the same age, because the fatter ones will bounce.
The point you made there is very interesting. I actually never thought about that. So like staying the same weight is actually not enough as you get older.
No, you're getting
Because
fatter.
most people gain weight anyway as well, which
Yeah.
makes that even scarier, what you just after saying there.
Well, there was just during COVID, there was average weight gain globally was like 10 pound or something in a single year. Like, so unless everyone's dieted that off, they're already 10 pound behind where they were only 2 years ago.
Yeah, and you've probably had this same experience over like since then, like the amount of people I've talked to who are like, yeah, I'm up 10 kilos over that 2 years and I need help, and I've never gained that much weight. Like, have you seen that kind of
Oh
yourself with
yeah.
people coming
Look,
into your
and
program?
yeah, and I mean, one of the things I work on really is taking ownership of things. And I feel like when we blame other things, and this could be the parent saying, oh, because of my kids, I don't have time to go to the gym. It could be someone saying, I'm so busy at work, I don't have time to go to the gym. Because of COVID, I gained weight. Well, hang on a second. Plenty of other people have those same things and don't have that same experience. The difference is they've taken responsibility for what's going on with them, and they make the choice to behave a certain way. You had a set of circumstances, you chose to behave that way, but what you're doing is by pointing the finger at something or someone else, you're absolving yourself from responsibility. And as we know, as an adult, like, you're accountable for everything you do, right? So when I turn around and go, well, I gained weight because of COVID, well, hang on a second. Like, COVID didn't come and pull your handcuff to the supermarket, force feed you bottles of Coke and packs of chips and stuff like that. Like, that was your choice, because I had lockdown too. I mean, everyone in Melbourne had tremendous lockdowns. I actually lost weight. In fact, I set it as a challenge to all my customers at that point. I said, this is the best opportunity you are ever going to have a six pack. No work meetings, no business lunches, no travel for work, 100% control of all your own meals. We're leaving lockdown with a six pack. And nearly all of them took it on board. I had a bunch of customers getting the best shape ever. In fact, all the promo photos I use now are my COVID customers.
That's so funny. Yeah,
But it's about the way you look at it, right?
yeah. I think it's the Will Smith quote, like it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're getting at there, right?
Yeah, well, I really like Jocko Willink's book, Extreme Ownership. If you've not read it, you should. It basically says everything's your fault. Like, just take ownership of everything. If I'm in a work situation and my boss doesn't let me do what I want to do, my fault. I didn't educate the boss appropriately as to why this was important. If I'm the boss and my employee fails, my fault. I hired the wrong person. I didn't train them adequately. I didn't teach them well enough why this thing was important. It's my fault. I let them down. So if we take the same view with our food, all those choices that are in the cupboard right now, those are mine and mine alone. Like, no one's forcing me to eat anything. If I wake up tomorrow and I'm 3 kilo heavier because I went crazy today, well, and actually that was last week. I ate a lot of cookies last week. I've lost 1.5 kilo of water weight this week because of all the cookies I ate last week. No one forced me to do that. I just ate a bunch of cookies and suffered the consequences and have now had to deal with it. But it's my fault and my responsibility alone.
Yeah, for sure, man. With regards to this strength, maintaining strength or working on strength in your 40s, what would you say would be, let's look at maybe 3 exercises. I'm 45. I'm that same kind of avatar, that we're going to kind of talk about throughout this call is haven't done much in the last 20 years. What would be 3 exercises you're like, yeah, you should be mastering those exercises to keep that explosiveness and strength as you age?
Look, I tend to train in like a push-pull legs format anyway with people. The reality is, in an hour-long workout, and whether that's the right length of time for a workout or not, that is the amount of time that people in their head want to devote to training for the day, right? So I need to get you warm. We need to do some kind of mobility thing, right, for whatever lifts we're going to do. I've realistically got 3 or 4 exercises for 3 or 4 sets each, and then you're out the door, right? And if I ask you to do any more, you're probably not going to do it. You won't be compliant for very long. So push-pull legs, the reality is, and people don't like this, it doesn't matter which exercises those are. just don't pick like fluffy ones. You know, don't do dumbbell flies instead of bench press or dips, for instance, or overhead press. Don't do rear delt raises instead of chin-ups, pull-ups, or rows. Don't do leg extensions instead of some kind of squat like a Bulgarian squat or a front squat or something like that. So the exercise itself is actually not that important. What is important is that it's an exercise that allows us to work very hard and access those high threshold fibers, right? So it has to be an exercise I can load heavy, and I don't need to do many reps of it to get that training effect. So a front squat's a great example. You can't do good sets of 10 in the front squat. Your form will fall to pieces. Like your upper back will probably cave in well before then. Once I've done like a major push-pull leg exercise, adding in the power element, there's two main ways. One is throwing stuff, one is jumping, right? So in terms of throwing, it doesn't even matter how you do it. It could be explosive push-ups, like a clap push-up, but you don't even need the clap. It could be throwing a medicine ball. It could be punching a bag as fast as you can. So there's a bunch of different ways I can get upper body explosiveness. And for the lower body, we probably don't want to go straight to depth jumping, like jumping off the roof and rebounding like the Russians used to, but maybe we could start with skipping rope or playing hopscotch or even some agility ladder drills, something that's going to get me to be quicker and again, access those power muscles, like the fast twitch connection that I'm not getting from normal weightlifting. Because for people who don't know, there's this thing called the force velocity curve. It says I can either lift heavy and slow, or I can go really light and fast. People in the gym are really good at heavy and slow, and they stop doing light and fast. And that's really, if you watch people as they age, everything becomes slower and slower. They stop doing stuff fast. You got to keep accessing that stuff. Throws and jumps are a really easy way to get them, but it doesn't need to be the crazy like CrossFit rebound box jumps and burpee box jumps, and you just don't need that. But some power, and I just had like skipping drills. If you know A and B skips in running, they're a great way to do it. A little bit of sprinting if you're conditioned for it. There are a bunch of ways you can get that in the lower body that aren't as dangerous as full-on rebound plyometrics.
Yeah, and that kind of brings us to our next point. Generally, you're in your 40s and 50s, like there's mileage on the clock. So, most guys like shoulders are all wrecked, knee issues, lower back. So from you've touched on the exercises. What about the guy? Okay, front squats hurt my knees, bench press hurts my shoulder. So like, how do they manage this kind of joint and injury side of things so they can keep being consistent and not like stop and start because of injury?
Yeah, well, I think again, like the fitness industry does people a disservice, because brief history of the fitness industry and strength and conditioning, the American Strength and Conditioning Association was a football coaches association. So it was actually the American Strength Coaches Association to begin with, right? And it was just football. And then they realized, well, hang on, there's soccer, there's basketball, there's a bunch of other sports we can dip our toe into and collect money from them, right? Like this is the history of fitness organizations in general, is look for ways to maximize their income. So then they became the Strength and Conditioning Association. All of the stuff was still being written by ex-football strength coaches, right? And a lot of them also, because of the influence, so America started to tank. So they had a really good weightlifter called Tommy Kono. He kind of left the scene, and American weightlifting nosedived. And they were like, well, we're no good at this weightlifting thing, but we really like lifting heavy weights. Let's invent powerlifting. And so that's how powerlifting came to be. And so what you get is a lot of strength and conditioning information, heavily influenced from the US, from football and from powerlifting. And we have this idea that if you don't want to do 5 lifts, which is Olympic weightlifting, clean and jerk and snatch, and then squat, bench, deadlift, that somehow you're not training strength. And the reality is those 5 lifts only apply to people who are competing in those lifts. If you're not a weightlifter or powerlifter, it actually doesn't matter what your performance in those lifts are, because strength is a general quality, right? So, for most people, if you just find an exercise that they can load, and it might even be like single leg press, for instance, right? I can name a bunch of Australian Olympic track cyclists who've won gold medals at the highest level, and that's the majority of their leg training. So it's clearly functional because they're winning gold medals and setting world records. So you can load it up. It's safe. It's really stable. There's a whole bunch of reasons why you can choose it. the actual exercise you pick really doesn't matter. As long as I said you don't use a fluffy exercise, don't replace single leg press with leg extensions, don't replace like weighted chin-ups with, I don't know, like lat pull downs. It's not the same thing, even if the weight on the stack is the same. But once you've got it out of your head that you don't need to worry about your performance in 5 lifts, you just need to find any lift. So it doesn't matter if deadlifting hurts you because it's not a requirement. It doesn't matter if squatting hurts you because it's not a requirement. It doesn't matter if bench pressing hurts you because it's not a requirement, right? Like, we just need to find a push, a pull, and a leg exercise that you can do. And just because you can do it today doesn't mean you'll do it tomorrow. So you also have to lose that, like, the ego, the attachment to things. And I think for a lot of people, as they get older, they have this idea that I used to squat, I used to deadlift, I used to do these things. Yeah, but that's not you now. That was you 20 years ago. And I mean, for me, as an example, I have days where I can deadlift, no problem. I have other days where deadlifting is clearly not a good idea for me. And I have to be okay with changing the exercise. Maybe today I do heavy kettlebell swings instead of deadlift, and on days when I'm like in between, maybe it's Romanian deadlift, maybe it's single leg deadlift. Doesn't matter. I'm still training that movement. I'm just training it in a way that my body is okay with today. So you don't have to tie yourself to a single movement. What you need to remember is we're looking for stuff we can load for like 3 to 5 reps at a time. I only need to do 3 or 4 sets of it so I can really work really, really hard on it. And I need to find exercises that fit my body right now, not my imagined self from 20 years ago.
Yeah, this is so important. And, looking at it like okay, it's a movement pattern and I can do whatever I need to do to hit that movement pattern. So I want to do a deadlift or hinge pattern. Deadlifts, I feel cranky with my back today. I'm going to do something else. And I think that's where, some people think that they can figure it out themselves. I think it's just, even for like 2 or 3 months, just hiring a coach who can actually educate you on how to do that efficiently. It's going to save people so much time over the long term, right? It's very hard for people to figure that out themselves, I find, if they're just going to go in and wing it.
And we all have this idea that we're weak and we need punishment. And, because exercise is seen as this thing where it's, I'm paying back the sins of my diet and my lifestyle, right? Like I ate poorly, so I got to go to the gym and bash myself. But I actually teach a programming workshop for regular people. And we wrote an entire month of strength training in under 10 minutes, because the big thing I tried to get across to people was that you have permission to change things. You don't have to be tied into bench press 3 workouts a week for the next 4 months or whatever, because again, strength is a general quality. It doesn't matter what I train because I'm not being tested in bench press. It just matters that I train that pattern, like you said, heavy and hard enough to stimulate the muscle, that fast twitch fiber that I'm after. The rest of it, what it actually looks like, is unimportant. So if I wanted to overhead press today and bench press tomorrow and do weighted dips the next day, that's all fine. Because again, I'm not being tested on any of them. I just need to train those muscle fibers in that kind of rep range. The same goes for back stuff, like for pulling. The same goes for lower body. And when you give people permission and show them that actually over time, it doesn't matter about repeating this exercise 16 times in a 5-week training period or whatever it happens to be, your progress, and I can actually even show you Russian research on this, is that your progress for most people will actually be better if you steer clear of specialized training programs where you focus only on a few things. By actually introducing variety and having less attachment to specific exercises, your progress is actually faster.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And it's also, as you said, like just day to day, week to week, like you can adjust things that's going to keep your injury risk lower. And like from a research standpoint, it's actually going to help overall strength benefits as well with the variety.
Yeah. I mean, the thing people don't realize is, and I always see these groups, they want to quote Russian research or, like this study from 1970 in Russia showed this. Well, the Russian strength system says that until you're a class 3 athlete, you're a beginner. And as a beginner, you'll be better on a non-specialized program. And if you actually look up the numbers, and I can't remember them off the top of my head, but like for an 80 kilo lifter, the total for powerlifting was immense. It worked out to like a 200 plus kilo squat and deadlift and about 140 kilo bench for an 80 kilo guy, right? So nearly triple bodyweight squat and deadlift and a nearly double bodyweight bench press. If you can't hit that, you're a beginner, right? And so people want to do all this advanced Russian stuff and go, well, this Russian thing said this and this other Russian thing said that. No. Here's what the bottom layer of the Russian system says is you are a beginner until you hit these standards. And all of their studies showed that beginners develop faster with a more varied approach, a concurrent approach, right? Not conjugate, that's different, but concurrent, training a bunch of different fitness qualities and not tying yourself to any particular thing until you can actually hit those. Your progress will be faster. And so people, when I first started explaining this to clients, they're like, oh no, but like there's too much variety and you just got to trust me, your progress will be faster. And the other side of it is it actually makes training kind of enjoyable. Like, because you can go in the gym today and go like, oh my God, like I've got to squat again. No, we're going to go do this other thing for legs today. You only need to squat on like one day every 3 weeks, maybe, because I've got all these other leg exercises I can choose from. They can be just as effective for our general beginner goals.
Yeah, and I think that ties very nicely into the start point you were saying about just like getting buy-in as well from a motivational standpoint. Like, what can I do today? What's repeatable today? And it's going to reduce the friction to actually get it done when you're, when resistance is high on those days. It's December 21st in the Northern Hemisphere, and the last thing you want to do is train, So we've touched on the mindset side of things. We've talked about the strength and explosiveness, the injury side of things. I think a nice way to tie this all together would be focusing on abdominal fat and dietary advice for guys over 40, because it's a massive part of the whole package. So yeah, again, thinking about that guy, he's 45, has done his whole experience is probably keto, paleo, vegan. He's maybe tried these because he thought that that's going to fix all of his issues. What advice would you give to him from a dietary standpoint?
So this is, it's like I was saying before about learning to be successful. So the way dieting works for most people is so that the kind of person who needs to crash diet is usually someone who's got a fairly on-off sort of personality, like everything's black or white. So everything's done to extremes. So they overeat excessively, right? And then like, well, I need to diet, so I'm going to do something extreme. It doesn't even matter what it is, like South Bay diet, lemon detox diet, like keto, fasting, whatever, doesn't even matter. But they pick an extreme thing and they obviously fail, right? And without even realizing that the more extreme your diet, the more likely you are to fail, and when you then fail, your rebound will be even bigger. So whatever excessive eating you had before, the more you try to restrict yourself, the more you're going to eat that back, because your body has got a set point for how much it wants to eat, right? If I need 2,000 calories a day and I only eat 1,000 for a couple of weeks, willpower will keep me going for a little while, and caffeine. But after that, my body's going to start screaming at me to go and eat the food that I haven't been eating, because that's what I need for normal metabolic processes. So the longer and more severely you restrict yourself for, the more you're going to eat back. The human brain is wired for feast or famine, because food was not that plentiful 1 million years ago when this shape came to be as hunter-gatherers, right? The last 100 years has taught us that food is really plentiful and available. But even before that, think back 100 years, Great Depression, World War I, right? People were eating like a piece of bread and smearing bacon fat on it or something and thinking they'd had a good meal because they couldn't afford to eat anything else. Food hasn't been that plentiful. We are wired to eat whatever's in front of us. And when you've undereaten, your body thinks, hey, survival situation, I'm going to have to put some food in the tank here. So the more extreme your diet, the more likely you are to fail. And then, of course, because in your head, you don't equate your failure with the extremity of the diet, you equate it to your laziness, right? So now I need to go harder, but I make myself more likely to fail, right? And of course I fail and I make this worse. I overeat again. Now I need to go even harder. And this is how you end up with like the full keto, intermittent fasting, water only on the weekends, like super extreme diet things. You'll never see a guy with year-round six-pack eating like that, right? The guy with the year-round six-pack, just like we're saying about workouts, it's consistency. So the diet tips for being lean is that I understand it took you a while to gain weight. It's going to take a while to come off. It won't be anywhere near as long as it took you to get overweight in the first place. I've seen in a single month, without people starving at all, guys lose nearly 10 kilo, like 18 pounds. So that's just over 8 kilo. And I've seen that multiple times. That seems to be the most that anyone can lose. And those guys clearly have a lot to lose. Like, again, someone who's only got to lose, like 2 or 3 kilo to get to a 6-pack, that's not them. But these guys are like 120, 130 kilo, so they can lose nearly 10 kilo in a month. But I've seen plenty of people lose 25 to 30 kilo in a year easily, right? And so if you've got 30 or 40 kilo to lose, like, I will tell people, just based on math, it's half to 1 kilo a week is the sustainable maximum you can actually lose. You'll see more in the first couple of weeks with the fluid loss, but sustainably, you're going to lose half to 1 kilo a week. We got to put some diet breaks in there, or A, you're going to go crazy, and B, your body's going to go berserk. And you can actually see, can you see my eyebrows at all? You see how crazy my eyebrows are? Yeah. So earlier in the year, this is how stressful dieting can be. I was dieting for photo shoots. My dad was in hospital. We were about to get married. We're planning honeymoon, like so much stuff going on all at once. And the stress of it has been so much that actually changed the pigment of my hair. And so I haven't lost my hair, but I have to shave it because the hair that's got no pigment, it's so fine that you can't even see it on my head. And so I've got these small patches still of actual pigmented hair. Weirdly, if I grow a beard, I have one here still. So I have this one dark spot and the rest is white, like Papa Smurf. And so, and I've got this tiny little bit here in my eyebrows where I've still got pigment. So that's what stressful dieting can do for you. And I was on really low calories, really low fat, really low carbohydrate, getting ready for this photo shoot. So you can see
how long was that going for, Andrew?
Only 2 months.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So the damage happens pretty fast. Luckily, on the day of my wedding, you could see one little spot here actually looked like a scar or something. Like there's just this one little spot where it looked like there was no hair. That was the very first patch. And then within a couple of months, the whole back of my head, and slowly it's been like more and more of my head. It's almost the entire head now. So I can go back to growing my hair soon. But, it shows the danger of extreme dieting. So because I could stop dieting, obviously, introduce fat back into my diet, put more calories in there. I've been to the doctor and they've said, it's not falling out. It's now good, but it takes 3 years for hair follicles to repair themselves. So given my age, there's a fair chance I'm never going to have color in my hair ever again at this point. So that's what extreme dieting will do for you. Or you can just be sensible and figure that we can do half to 1 kilo a week. You don't need to starve themselves. I was talking to customers this morning for this group call. None of them reported feeling hungry. They're all losing half to 1 kilo a week. So women are like on the lower end, men probably on the higher end, but everyone's in this comfortable range where things are happening for them. You don't need to starve yourself. You don't need to try to kill yourself in training. The 2 big things I work on with people is 1, total calories, getting that right. And I'll touch on that in just a second. And 2, protein and getting that right. Protein's easy. It's a gram per pound of body weight. When dieting, maybe slightly higher, maybe up to 1.2 to 1.5, just to help preserve muscle mass. When you're dieting, it's very easy to accidentally lose some muscle as you go. If you keep the protein intake that little bit higher and make sure you keep resistance training, preserving muscle is pretty easy then. Total calories, when you look at all the charts that are available online, they're from about 40 or 50 years ago when there was far less automation. So it's estimated that housework alone was worth another 10% calories per day, just because, you had to hang the laundry up and you had to do all these manual things. Now with the amount of automation, it's come down significantly. People sit more. We know that. So when you're looking at these things, you got to look, firstly, it's probably about 10% too high. Everyone regards themselves as being, I go to the gym 3 days a week, I'm active. No, you're sedentary. So if we look at 168 hours in a week and you're saying you work out for 3 of them, that's 165 hours of sitting still, you're sedentary, right? So I tell all my customers, if you've got an office job, you are sedentary. I don't care how much exercise you do, we count you as sedentary. And I've only been wrong once in the last couple of years with this. And it's just a guy who he's very jittery, actually, like he can't sit still. So he's burning up a ton of calories just sitting still. But everyone else, trust me, you've got a sedentary lifestyle, no matter how much, even when I calculate my own calories and I train like 12 to 15 hours a week, I'm sedentary. right? And I've done metabolic tests and DEXA scans and like VO2 tests, and I've done all that stuff, and it is within 50 calories. It is that close. So, like most calorie counters overestimate. You got to get your calorie number right. It's as simple as, for guys, it's your body weight in pounds times 10 for a sedentary lifestyle. You can start to play around with that a little bit, but that's going to be a rough starting point. Like I said, 1 to 1.5 grams per pound for protein. And then if you really want
just
to
on that, Andrew. So like, let's just say 100 kilo guy, or let's just say 200 pound guy. Okay. So that's 2000 calories a day. That's 2000 calories a day. So that's like specifically for a fat loss phase that he's on that 2000 calories.
No, that'll actually be his maintenance calories.
Wow.
Because the other side of it is that from 20 onwards, you're losing percentages of your metabolism year by year. So it's about a 5% drop per decade. So when you get to someone who's in their 40s or 50s, it's 10% down on what their calculations were estimating anyway. So, like when you look at these things, and they'll be like, I had this, he was a customer, he was mid-30s. His wife was a dietitian, and she was feeding him for jiu-jitsu competitions, but she was really fattening him up for Christmas because he couldn't figure out why he couldn't lose weight. And I said, well, it's because you're eating about 1,000 calories a day too much. He goes, no, it can't be right. Like my wife, like superstar. And I said, well, just try it my way and we'll see what happens. And he went from nearly 100 kilo down to 83 in the space of about 3 months. And the difference was he just ate the right amount of food. And he maintains that now year round. His wife she just assumed him to be far more active. So she was using it was body weight in pounds times 15 or 16 or something. I'm like, it's no wonder you're not losing weight. Like, it's just way too much food.
That's really helpful. Okay. Yeah. Because a lot of them, the calorie calculators would be kind of giving you a higher amount.
Way too high. Yeah. And people forget, they look at their Garmin or whatever after exercise, and their Garmin says, well, you burnt 400 calories. So if we're talking about that 200-pound guy, 2,000 calories a day, roughly. So in a 24-hour day, you're burning 80 calories an hour, if that's the case, right? So if you burnt 400 during an hour of exercise, okay, well, you burnt another 300 roughly versus what you would have sitting still. But people add the total amount in. They forget that there's a really big difference between the total and the active amount. The active amount is just that small amount more that you did. And walking is a great example. People are like, oh, well, I walked for an hour today. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, you burnt like another 100 calories versus what you would have done sitting on the couch. It's not a huge amount extra. 100 calories. It's like an apple.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's it's generally people just don't realize how much they're eating and how little they're moving. I think that's very, very
absolutely
clear.
I had a client today say that he's been, and so this is his first week, and we measure everything. So if it goes in your mouth, it gets weighed, it gets added into MyFitnessPal. And he sent me a picture last night, and he said, I think I need to stop eating nuts as a snack. I'm like, why is that? And he showed me the picture. 1,700 calories in nuts yesterday. Yeah.
Right.
I'm like, yeah.
It's like half a kilo, is it?
It was because it was walnuts. It was like 100 grams or not even 100 grams. So many calories, ridiculous, right? And there are so many foods like that. If you ate, and I love peanut M&Ms, just about my favorite chocolate. I would eat a whole family size bag on my own back when I was doing Ironman, no problem. And then you realize, like, holy shit, that's like about 1,000 calories of M&Ms. A serving size of M&Ms, of peanut M&Ms, is 6. How many people eat 6 M&Ms and stop?
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with nuts and stuff as well. Like as a snack, it's just like you're going to finish the packet. Like that's generally what tends to happen.
Now this guy has actually seen it. He's like, oh crap, like because he knows roughly now how much he's supposed to be eating for the day. He knows, like, because we've obviously had talk about how the math works and all that kind of stuff. And when he saw that, he's like, oh yeah, that behavior is not at all in line with what my goal is. I need to, like, this needs to stop. And so I doubt he'll do that ever again, to be honest. He was mortified when I spoke to him this morning, like, because like video call, right? Like I can see his face when he's explaining it. And he was really just shocked at how much it is. But if you don't record it, how do you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really helpful part for people just to understand, like, oh wow, that I thought that this was a healthy thing, like nuts, which there's no, they are healthy, but it's just calorifically they're incredibly dense, and people don't realize that.
You can
Mate,
still overeat chicken breasts and broccoli.
I'm conscious of your time, mate. Are you okay for another like
I'm
five
fine to
minutes?
keep going. Yeah. I'm
Okay.
just my wife is a firefighter and she's actually on night shift tonight, so I'm home alone.
All right. Let's jump into rapid fire to finish
Yep.
it off, mate. Let's talk about something you've changed your mind on recently. And by recently, let's just say 12 to 18 months.
Actually, I think Andrew Huberman is someone I've changed my mind on recently. Um, like I'm generally distrustful of people when you see them with big social media presences and saying, like, this training thing's amazing. And I actually think he's got something. I'm not sure it's cohesive yet, but I don't think he's quite the quack that I thought he was. So, I'm not saying he's the best source of information, but he's definitely better than I thought he was. Where I would look at some people, and actually you mentioned Peter Attia before. I'm not sure Peter Attia is the guy I'd take advice from. I would take advice from his guests. They seem to really know their subject matter. He does a great job getting them on the show and interviewing them. I'm not sure he's got it put together yet in a format that is really useful for people. And I say that simply because if you look at the two guys, if you look at Huberman with his shirt off, and he just did a podcast with Cameron Haynes, the bow hunter in the US, and they were carrying a rock up this hill. Huberman's in shape. And you look at Attia when he's in the gym training, you're like, I can't even tell you train. So, like for me, and I'm not saying you need to be able to bench press a house and run a marathon and, like look like Mr. Olympia or anything, but you should at least look like you exercise if you're giving out exercise advice. I'll give you a pass when you get to Stu McGill's age, but for everyone else, you should look like you're in shape. And Peter Attia is not there, but Huberman is. So it says to me that there's something that he's got there that's actually working properly.
Yeah, like those guys, I think people need to be careful though, because a lot of people start really, oh, Huberman or Attia said this about zone two cardio, and it's like, well, do you even walk? Like they start looking at I think they overcomplicate a lot of things as well,
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
regards to protocols.
And people forget, like, the goal of a social media influencer, and those guys are definitely social media influencers, right? Their goal is views. That's it. It's not even to put out the best information. All they want is they need eyeballs on their page, because the basic statistics for internet sales are 1%. That's all you need to know, right? If I've got 1,000 people looking at my page right now, I expect to sell 10 somethings, right? So if I've got 1,000,000 viewers, I expect to sell 1,000 of them. I think that's right. Or 10,000 of them, however the math works out, right? So all they care about is clicks on a video that are going to direct people to a website to sell something. They don't actually care about the quality of the information. What they care about is you buying from them. They just care about the traffic. So you have to be very careful, because no one starts off with I don't know, like a NAD plus podcast, right? Because they're going to exhaust all the regular topics first. They're going to start with like the best pushing exercises and, like how to keep yourself safe in the gym and avoid this exercise. And gradually the things become like more and more fluffy because they're struggling to find things to talk about. And now, as you say, like we're down to these little subjects like this, we should be talking about what's the best breakfast to have for you. Like what's a
Mm.
reliable way to get in some protein first thing in the morning for you? What a great subject. But no, I've done that, and I've done that 10 times in different formats. And now all I've got left is to talk about this thing here, because I make out how important it is. You start thinking that is of high importance. That thing is like 0.5%. I need you
Yeah.
to go back over here and focus on like 4 decent meals a day and getting the right amount of protein. That's actually the thing you need to focus on. But that's not going to get me any podcasts. No one's going to watch that. They might watch one of those. They're not going to watch 10 of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And
And
then
you're not
it's
getting 1,000,000 views on a video because you tell someone to go to bed and get 8 hours sleep.
it's funny, like, because like I think if you got 8 hours sleep, a lot of your issues would literally
Absolutely.
disappear.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen crazy results, like people who couldn't lose fat no matter what we tried, get 1 extra hour of sleep a night, like not even get 8, go from 6 to 7. If you think about it, if you go from 6 hours sleep a night to 7, you get the equivalent in a week of an extra night's sleep a week.
who wouldn't feel awesome with 8 nights of sleep a week?
That's so true.
Yeah.
Uh,
And like people wonder why good things aren't happening for them. Get an extra night of sleep. See how you feel.
Yeah, and it comes back to the technology use. One thing as well I found that I thought was a no-brainer, but like people have their phone notifications on at nighttime, some people,
Yeah.
which is if you're not going to be able to sleep if your phone is pinging at 3 a.m.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, I work online and I'm set up so I can work on my phone from anywhere. I don't even have my notifications on, right? I don't even do email on my phone. So God forbid you email me when I'm in Nepal or something, because I won't get it. And I tell all my customers that I get email on my computer while I'm sat in my office, right? I don't do email at any other time. And I don't even get notifications on my phone. All of mine are turned off all the time, so that if I want to look at Facebook, I have to actually open the app and all that kind of stuff. I'm not getting constantly besieged by stuff all day long, and even worse at night. My wife has hers on, and we have discussions about it all the time because firefighters are notoriously bad sleepers. Her phone will be buzzing at like midnight because people are having a WhatsApp discussion and she's got her WhatsApp notifications turned on.
Yeah, man, that's a tough one. Let's talk about ideal dinner date. If you could sit down with someone, pick their brain for 3 hours over a meal, who would it be and why?
Um, Probably Ian King. I really like Ian. I mean, we're not best mates, but I've spoken to him a number of times over the years. Um, he has always got a fresh take on things, and I think, he's a little bit isolated in terms of where he is. So he's not being influenced by social media. He's not into the social media thing anyway. And I think it gives him the freedom to experiment with things. So I've always appreciated his take on things. I think he's uh, he's like one of those hidden gems in the industry. And I tell people all the time, like the best coaches, you won't hear about them. Best coaches are not making 2 Instagram reels a day and like a 20-minute YouTube video every week. The best coaches are working 6 days a week, 11 months a year, making sure that their clients get the best possible result, whether that's athletes or regular people. And that's what they're focused on. They're not busy doing social media posts. So the best guys you'll never hear about, he maybe has kind of snuck into being known through his relationship with Charles Poliquin many years ago. But he's still very much unknown.
How old is he?
He's older than me. So I would say he's late 50s, early 60s.
Hey, yeah, and that's a really good point. Like if you're like I used to work full time as a PT, so I wasn't really on social media, and now I'm full time online, so now I have time to make videos. But if
Same.
you're like, yeah, if you're like a 25-year-old and you've got a big following, um, chances are you haven't done a lot of actual coaching, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, and I'm not going to name the particular person I'm talking about, but there's this one US coach I can think of all the time who keeps going about the thousands of people he's trained. I'm like, well, hang on, mate. Like you're 30 years old. You did a 4-year degree at university and you had to do a 3-year undergrad at US university for that thing. So you're at university for 7 years, right? So from 18 to 25, you're a full-time student. And then you're now 30, you've got 5 years of work experience, but you write like 2 articles a week. You have social media posts every day. You've got videos. Like, I don't know when you're training people, but you obviously have a different amount of 24 hours in the day, because what people don't see, like the amount of time it takes to make a good social media post, even if it's just a 60-second reel, you might have to say that thing like 10 times to not stutter, to like make sure that the dog didn't bark in the background, or your wife didn't call out your name in the middle of it, or you know what I mean? Like those things are not quick, even though they might only be a short period of time that you look at it on your phone. And some of the really good ones, like if I pick an Emily Skye, for instance, who's been around for a long time, she's tremendous at what she does, makes a ton of money, and so she should. But her social media is 24/7, right? Like she's got a permanent camera person. They've got permanent film editors. They are filming everything all day long, sending it off to another person who chops it up, puts it together, and posts it for them. That's the amount of work that goes into that high level social media stuff. And if you're doing all that, your focus all day long is on content creation. It is certainly not on training people and answering, oh yeah, you need to eat like 10 more grams of protein in that meal so that the day was better. Like you're not training anyone under those circumstances.
Yeah, so true, man.
Yeah, those people are selling programs. They're not training people. And those are two really different things.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, I think, because I think it was Dan John when I was talking to him like a month ago. He was like, the average age is kind of like 22 to 28 in the industry. And then most people realize at that age, they're like, I can't make a life out of this. This sucks. I'm not able to make any money. And then they quit. And then the new people come through. You know, it's kind of like this weird, it's a very strange industry in that sense, right?
It is. So in Australia, I actually know the statistics for Australia. So there's a ceiling of about 30,000 personal trainers all the time, right? But every year, 10% leave, right? So if there's 30,000 brand new or there's 30,000 now, you know, next year we're going to go down to 27,000, but there'll be 3,000 more. And we've stated about 30,000 for a number of years now. At the 5-year mark, though, so it's 10% per year leave every year up until year 5, and then 70% leave, right? So you have this 10% reduction for the first 4 years, and then all of a sudden, nearly everyone who's left after the first 5 years goes. But that's no different to normal small business statistics, right? Most small businesses will be gone in 2 to 5 years. Then you go right out to the other end. They've only got stats out to the 15-year mark. It's 1%. 1% of the people who started 15 years ago are left at the 15-year mark. And so, I mean, at the 30-year mark where I am, I don't think it's a point something percent clearly. But it explains, like, imagine, I mean, you can find plenty of 30-year accountants. You can find plenty of 30-year doctors and 30-year lawyers, 30-year physiotherapists. You can find plenty of them. There are not many personal trainers, like you say, who've got more than 5 years experience. And that's like, when you look at the way, if you were selling a course, that's who you sell to. You don't sell to a 30-year trainer. The 30 years trainer probably has seen what you're selling anyway. But if I sell to you, you'll be gone. But hopefully you'll tell some other people at the gym you work at or whatever how good my course was. And when they're ready, they'll come along and then they'll go, but they'll have told someone else. So I can keep teaching the same beginner stuff, basically, that same first 5 year stuff forever. Never need to change it. And this is why when people go, oh, my personal trainer didn't seem very knowledgeable. Well, no, because they've only been on the job for a few minutes, mate. Like, if they were a carpenter, they'd still be an apprentice, right? The first 3 years is your apprenticeship. You wouldn't let them touch the nails and nail gun on their own without anyone watching them for the first few years. You know, my accountant, he's got a junior accountant who's still got an accounting degree. So he's got a 4-year business and accounting degree and has done a number of years of accounting like a junior. He doesn't even get to sign off on my stuff until my actual accountant sees it, right? Not in personal training. You go do your couple of month course and you're thrown in the deep end of having to run a business after a few months with no experience about business or actually training people. It's no surprise they don't last.
Yeah, man, that's so true about what you said about the carpenter as well. And just, you know, essentially people are apprentices, then they leave because they can't make it. It's really hard. It's so hard in those initial years. They're wearing a lot of hats.
Interestingly, a good friend of mine is a very good physio. He's maybe the best spinal rehab physio in the world right now. So like Stuart McGill has ticked off his ideas on strength training for spine rehab. So that's a pretty big thing. He had a post about physios leaving within 10 years. So the majority of physios quit within 10 years. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because there's a much bigger barrier to get into physiotherapy than there is to get into personal training. But it says to me it's the same problem. It's so a business that's not providing a customer satisfaction, right? Like that someone comes in and says, my back hurts, fix my back's not getting fixed. In the personal training sense, I'm overweight, I need to lose weight, and they pay the money, they don't lose weight, right? Those two things, the customer is going to be unhappy. And then the final part is no business training. I guarantee they do no business training in physiotherapy school. They spend all the years on biomechanics and how to treat muscles and all this different stuff. I guarantee they don't have any lessons at all on business. And personal training school is the same. They might do 2 or 3 hours of some basic business stuff, and then just that's the end of it. So how do you expect someone to be successful in a business when they've got no skill at running a business?
Yeah. Next question. This just literally came up because it's what we're talking about now. I wasn't going to ask you this, but if you could, wave a magic wand and make this a prerequisite of basically getting into the personal training industry, what changes would you actually make from next year for all coaches?
I actually used to teach personal training about let me think, like 13 years ago or so, like 13, 14 years ago. I wrote the programming side of things. So this is pre-social media. We had a business component, but it was all based around having an actual in-person gym. And I think now, I mean, clearly online is a much bigger possibility and really opens things up to people. So not just having actual business stuff in there, but these days you'd have to have some social media stuff. You'd have to have some how to advertise on Facebook, because holy cow, you can throw a lot of money away Facebook advertising. Facebook will happily take your money and give you no customers if you got it wrong. If you want to advertise to something so far out of your niche market, they don't care. They'll take your money. No one from Facebook will say that's a really bad idea to run that ad. So those things, I still don't see them being taught. If the industry is changing, the industry has changed, particularly in the last 3 years, because COVID changed everything, right? The number of online training options now are sky high compared to where they were only 3 years ago. And yet none of the personal training courses are looking at this. They should be talking about social media algorithms, like whether you should be doing Reels on Instagram, or should you be using TikTok, or, like what each platform needs to reward the person who's on there. And that side of things, at the moment, it's basically whether you look good or not. But there are plenty of people who are on social media with big followings who don't necessarily have the best bodies, who aren't the prettiest, but they've figured out how to use the algorithm to their advantage. But how many hours do they have to spend wasting on that? If you're a brand new personal trainer, it's very difficult. So the social side of stuff, I'll say like the e-commerce side of stuff, is definitely not being taught adequately. And given the way the industry is going, I actually see, and it was interesting because in Australia, someone died in a 24-hour gym about like 3 years ago. And I thought it would completely change the 24-hour gym landscape in Australia, that the liability issues and all that kind of stuff would shut that down completely. Nope, nothing happened, right? So what that says to me is that, and gyms have, when I started, gyms had gym instructors. You would come in, would write you a program. We'd try to get some personal training, but mostly it was gym programs for all the members. So if you want to get good at programming, write like 8 training programs a night for 5 nights a week for a few years. You'll get pretty good at programming pretty fast. But then they started figuring out, well, it was better for us to have just personal trainers, right? And I'll get rent from the personal trainers. I don't have to pay wages because the personal trainers are in charge of their own money. But now, why would you need personal trainers? Why can't I just have the gym you pay to come in anytime you want? And if you want personal training, well, you can get it online. I don't even have to have that person coming into my gym anymore, because them operating their business in my gym is a liability issue for me, even though I make them carry their own liability insurance. So the industry has changed substantially. I think the 24-hour gym online side of things has really changed things. And that's certainly not something I see being taught by anywhere in Australia, maybe overseas somewhere, but not here. All the businesses here, they're still, I mean, they're lucky if they even talk about CrossFit here still. And CrossFit is a big enough name and common enough now that some of those programming ideas at least should be turning up in programming talks in a PT workshop, but they're not. They're still talking about, like chest, back, and buys and all that kind of stuff. Like it's programming from the 80s, like I haven't seen anyone change any of that stuff yet.
I don't understand how every PT certification, it's like they're trying to make it as bad as possible. It's like it's absolute crap. Like I don't like bashing stuff, but it's always really bad.
I don't know about overseas, but here we have a thing called the National Skills Framework. And so they will decide for a certificate 3 or a certificate 4 how many hours you need to spend what the units of competency should be. And then it's up to the individual colleges to figure out how to fill out those times. But when it comes to the programming stuff, I mean, I had at one point when I was trying to get the RKC kettlebell thing certified here in Australia through Fitness Australia, they said, oh, well, we'll have one of our fitness experts look at it. I'm like, well, I'm the only senior RKC in Australia. There's no one who teaches this material at a higher level here than me. And I present for FMS, who are like the specialists in combining kettlebells and functional rehabilitation stuff. Like, who are you going to get to look at that? Went, oh, one of our exercise physiologists. I'm like, but he's never used kettlebells. Like, I know, and I happen to know the guy in particular. I'm like, he's never used kettlebells. How can you have him assess our course when he's never even touched the thing that he's assessing? And so, of course, what you're going to see in the courses is like the dinosaur stuff, because the guys who've worked their way into a senior position in these organizations are from the 80s and the 90s, and they're old school ex-phys and physio guys. They don't understand about any of the new stuff that's going on. They think CrossFit's just a fad.
Yeah, man. That's so funny getting someone who's never done kettlebells to like assess it.
Yeah. Like when I said that to them, I was like, well, are you going to send it back to me so I can assess it for myself? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't understand who you're getting to assess it. There is no one in the country who's spent more time learning this stuff than me. Who are you possibly going to give it to assess? And they couldn't see the disconnect between giving it to someone who had no experience in the thing and getting the course ticked off as okay. And it's, I mean, the stupid way. So FMS is a 3-day workshop here, right? The maximum amount of points you can get, I think you got to get 20 in 2 years or 24 or something. The maximum you can get in a single workshop is 18, right? And it's based on how many hours it is. The FMS workshop was actually 20 hours over 3 days. So I'm like, well, we should get 20 for starters. The only other workshop in Australia that gave 18 points for a single workshop was a walking workshop. It was a workshop on how to use walking poles in an alpine environment. It's like Nordic walking, right? I'm like, are you kidding me that a course on walking gets the same number of points as this thing that's being used by the NFL and the Navy SEALs and is regarded worldwide as like the gold standard of functional movement training? And you're saying these two things are equivalent. And that's kind of where the relationship broke down.
There's so many disconnects there. Last question, Andrew. This is a selfish question, but I'd love to know your answer. Advice to your 35-year-old self. I'm 35 now.
Go bigger earlier. So, when I got to 40, and we said this before the recording came on. So I realized when I was 38. So that's 14 years ago, right? So, geez, what's that? 2009. I realized that no one was writing for guys my age. And so I thought, well, someone needs to. So I started. And we talked before about most people leave within 5 years. I've got 12 years now of experience. Sorry, 14 years solely focused on the 40-year-old guy. I've got like 1% of the fitness industry knowledge just in 40-year-olds, not counting all the stuff that went before it. But physically, I did some really cool stuff from my 40s onwards because I wanted to see. So I did like 1,000-kilometer charity bike ride. I did an Ironman a year later. I did a bunch of half Ironmans. I did this thing with SEAL Fit in the States, which is like a civilian Navy SEAL selection, like Hell Week. So it's like a few days of no sleep, just getting beaten up by Navy SEALs. And recently in my 50s, I've started mountaineering. So we've been up to 6,000 meters so far, which is pretty damn hard. But now for that, and I'll use that as the example for why I say go big earlier. At 8,000 meters, the death risk is 1%, right? Regardless of age, up until 50, right? So whether you go or whether a 20-year-old goes, you got a 1% chance of death. But at 50, it starts to climb. And it really starts to climb because at 60, it's 25%. And at 70, it's 75%, right? So it's not just going up steady, it's going like this, right? At 55, it really starts to tip to accelerate quite high. So where I am right now, I'm still in kind of the 1% to 2% risk of death just for trying to go that high, right? One of the most famous mountaineers in the world, this guy, Conrad Anker, who's done Everest and he's done all kinds of crazy stuff. He had a heart attack at 6,000 meters at 55 years old, right? So he clearly wasn't unfit. He wasn't unused to it, really experienced. Luckily, actually recognized what was going on, and him and his climbing partners came down. But you see the risk. If I had started what we were doing now 10 years ago, there'd be no risk. And so we right now, when I say we, my wife and I, we have some plans. We would like to try climbing 8,000 meter mountain, not necessarily Everest. There's some other choices that would be more suitable for our skill level, but they're still quite high. So the challenge is a cardiovascular one rather than a technical one. And that for us at, Australia, no mountains, nothing high, not much of a winter environment. It's not really practical to train for high altitude, high skill mountaineering for us, but high altitude cardiovascular stuff we can do, right? Because cardiovascular is, you can do that at sea level. It's all the same. But I'm the problem. If it was just her, she has 5 years up her sleeve. She could take a really measured approach to it. We're in kind of a rush now though. So we actually have a plan going up to about April or September in 2025 to try to get us onto an 8,000 meter mountain. If it weren't for my age, we could be a lot more calm about things. So, and that came about because my mum, I originally went to Nepal the first time with my mum. We went up to about 3,000 meters when she was like, so she'd done the powerlifting. And then after the last comp, she said, I think I want to go to Nepal. She tried to enlist my dad. He realized he wasn't going to be fit enough. I got roped in at the last minute, got to walk around up to about 3,000 meters with my mum. We planned another trip back that was actually just before COVID hit. Like literally borders were shutting and I was still sure we were going to get to go. Wasn't sure how we were going to come back. And then like 2 weeks before we were due to go, everything completely shut. My wife and I went in April this year for our honeymoon. We actually did that trek that we were going to do back then for our honeymoon. We've been back in September. We've gone higher. We've climbed, and this time actually climbed, not just walked. We're going back in April, but you see, like there's this fast schedule. Like every 5 to 6 months, we're going back. But my mum, if you gave her one thing she could do now, it would be walk to Everest Base Camp. But she knows she can't anymore. Like she's still really good for 80, but she can't do that anymore. So I know the regret she has from that. I want to make sure that when I'm 80, I'm not looking at anything physical, any adventure that I want to have and going, that's the one I should have done. So start earlier because, I mean, you just never know. I've got plenty of friends who were fit and now aren't here. And, I'm in the drop zone for stuff. So I said before about my brother, I mean, it's really unfortunate, but he's probably going to have a major health incident really soon, like sometime in the next 5 years. And I have a bunch of friends who've been smokers and heavy drinkers for their whole life. They're probably not going to have a great next 10 years either. So a lot of those people who still have things that they want to accomplish and do, they're going to get taken away from them. Whether they die or not, they're going to have them taken away. So start now. Don't have any regrets when you get to 60, 70, 80, whatever years old and say, I wish I'd done whatever it was. Go do it now. If you've got kids, give the kids to the grandparents. Go do that thing now. Your kids won't even remember probably that mum and dad went on a big trip for a couple of weeks. Go do it now because you never know what's going to happen next year. It could be another fucking COVID and we'll get shut down for another 2 years again. So, and maybe then after that, the opportunity is completely gone like it is with my mum.
Yeah, man, that is such good advice, for me personally, but I think a lot of people are waiting for fitness. And it's like, you're going to regret it so badly. So I think it's
now's the time. Like it's, it's like people buy fancy clothes and they say, well, I'll wear it for this special occasion. And they never wear it. You bought this amazing dress or this great suit or whatever. It makes you feel fantastic. You spend a bomb on it and you never wear it. It just sits in your cupboard collecting dust. Like now's the time to wear that thing. Now's the time to go do the adventures. If you don't, and particularly like in my age, people die from heart attacks at my age all the time, right? Even fit, healthy ones die from heart attacks. They get cancer. There's all kinds of negative things that happen from about 50 onwards. So go now while you've still got the opportunity because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, man, that's such a great message to end today on. And this was awesome, man. This was such a good conversation, like just to get your knowledge, Where can people find out more about you? Where can they learn more about your coaching, about, you know, any products you have, about just more information about you online?
So Facebook, I'm Andrew Reid. So there's an Andrew Reid professional page. There is a fitness group called Peak Performance 40, which is, you know, it's for ambitious guys over 40 like me who want to go and have adventures. And the website is now changed. It's peakperformance40.com, and that's 40, the numbers, not 40, the letters. So peakperformance40.com. And, you know, the goal is really help people have these amazing, fulfilling lives with fitness. You know, when I first started, I wanted to cure Australia of obesity, which clearly hasn't happened. Utter failure in that respect. But, you know, now nothing makes me happier than when I see like a client come back from some big adventure. I've got a client who's actually going on a running holiday with his wife through the Alps, through the French Alps soon. It's like a 7-day long, it's not an ultra run, but you run, right? And so it's a running tour of the Alps. How amazing is that as an adventure? And you think about like the bond my mother and I have because of these trips we've had, like, and my wife and I, my wife is my climbing partner, which is quite unusual. But when you're relying on someone else solely, the bond you get is so much stronger. And, you know, sharing these things, this is what I said, leave the kids at home, go now, give them to your grandparents, let your mum and dad look after their grandkids and go have an adventure with your wife. It will make a tremendous difference in your relationship and just in terms of your overall happiness. So, you know, it's you got to go now. That's all I can say.
I love it, man. Awesome, mate. Really appreciate your time.